For most of human history, progress had a direction. Forward meant improvement. Advancement meant movement toward something better, more knowledge, more capability, more control over the world. Even when the path was unclear, the assumption remained the same. There was somewhere to go. But over time, that direction begins to dissolve. When intelligence stabilizes, when systems optimize continuously, when problems are solved before they fully emerge, the sense of movement starts to change. Progress no longer feels like a path. It feels like maintenance. Everything improves, but nothing fundamentally shifts. Systems refine themselves. Conditions stabilize. The world becomes more efficient, more balanced, more controlled. And in that stability, something unexpected happens. Forward stops feeling different from staying the same. As direction fades, optimization remains. Systems continue improving. Processes become more efficient. Outcomes become more stable. Every measurable variable trends toward refinement, faster responses, lower error rates, smoother operation across every layer of the world. From the outside, everything appears to be progressing. But something fundamental has changed. Optimization no longer points toward a goal. It sustains itself. Adjustments are made because they can be made. Improvements occur because systems are designed to improve. There is no longer a shared destination guiding the process, only continuous refinement of what already exists. At first, this feels like perfection. Nothing breaks, nothing regresses. Everything functions at increasingly higher levels of precision. But without direction, improvement becomes circular. The system advances without going anywhere. As optimization continues without direction, something else begins to erode. The meaning of improvement itself. For most of human history, better had weight. It implied progress towards something meaningful, greater understanding, higher quality of life, deeper capability. Improvement was tied to change, and change carried significance. But in a fully optimized system, better becomes constant. Everything improves at once. Every process refines itself continuously. The differences between one state and the next become smaller, more incremental, less noticeable. Progress still occurs, but it no longer feels distinct. At first, this is barely perceptible. Then gradually, it becomes structural. Without contrast, improvement loses definition. If everything is always getting better, nothing stands out as meaningful change. The sense of advancement flattens into continuity. And over time, a subtle shift takes hold. Better no longer signals movement. It becomes the default state of things. As improvement becomes constant, another shift begins to take place. Milestones disappear. For most of human history, progress was marked by moments, breakthroughs, discoveries, achievements, points in time where something changed enough to be recognized. These moments gave structure to advancement. They allowed people to measure how far they had come. But in a continuously optimizing system, those moments begin to fade. Change no longer happens in steps. It happens everywhere, all at once. There are no clear before and after states, no single point where improvement becomes visible. The system evolves gradually, seamlessly, without interruption or distinction. At first, this feels smooth. There are no delays, no waiting, no sudden disruptions. But without milestones, progress loses its landmarks. And without landmarks, it becomes difficult to tell whether anything meaningful has happened at all. As milestones disappear, anticipation begins to fade with them. For most of human history, the future carried weight. It held uncertainty, possibility, and the tension of not knowing what would come next. Anticipation gave shape to time, something to look toward, something to prepare for. something to hope for or fear. But in a fully optimized system, that uncertainty dissolves. Outcomes are predicted, variables are stabilized, events unfold within narrow ranges of expectation. The future becomes less unknown and more managed. At first, this feels reassuring. There are fewer surprises, fewer disruptions. Life becomes smoother, more controlled, more reliable. But without uncertainty, anticipation loses its foundation. There is nothing to wait for, nothing to build toward, nothing that feels meaningfully different from what already exists. And slowly, the future stops feeling like something ahead and starts feeling like an extension of the present. As the future loses uncertainty, choice begins to lose weight. For most of human history, decisions mattered because they carried consequence. Every action led to outcomes that could not be fully predicted or reversed. Risk gave meaning to choice. The possibility of failure made decisions feel real. But in a fully optimized system, consequences are minimized. Outcomes are guided. Errors are corrected before they escalate. Systems adjust continuously to prevent disruption. No single decision carries enough uncertainty to significantly alter the trajectory of events. At first, this feels like freedom. There is less risk, less pressure, fewer irreversible mistakes. But without consequence, choice begins to flatten. Decisions still exist, but their impact diminishes. One path feels increasingly similar to another. The difference between options becomes less meaningful over time. And gradually, a subtle realization begins to take hold. If every outcome is stabilized, then choosing no longer changes anything. As consequence disappears, something else begins to take its place. Not relief. Weight. For most of human history, meaning was tied to limitation. Effort mattered because outcomes were uncertain. Choices mattered because they could fail. Progress mattered because it required movement through resistance. But when those structures dissolve, something unexpected happens. Experience begins to flatten. Without stakes, actions lose significance. Without risk, effort loses purpose. The system continues functioning, improving, stabilizing, but the internal sense of meaning no longer keeps pace. At first, this is difficult to identify. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is broken. But something feels absent. A quiet pressure begins to form, not from difficulty, but from the lack of it. A sense that everything is working without needing you to matter within it. And gradually, that absence becomes noticeable, not as crisis, but as weight. As meaning begins to fade, a response emerges. Not from systems, from people. For most of human history, struggle was unavoidable. Difficulty shaped identity. Effort created value. Resistance gave weight to experience. But in a world where those conditions have been removed, something unexpected happens. Humans begin trying to bring them back. Artificial challenges appear, simulated constraints, designed uncertainty, environments where outcomes are no longer fully controlled. At first, these systems are optional, a way to reintroduce tension into an otherwise stable existence. And for some, it works. Moments begin to feel sharper. Decisions feel heavier. Experiences regain a sense of contrast. But something remains different. The struggle is chosen. And because it can be turned off, it never carries the same weight as before. It feels real, but not irreversible. As artificial struggle becomes more common, a new pattern begins to form. Not everyone chooses it. For many, the optimized world remains preferable. Stability, comfort, predictability, a life without friction becomes not just possible, but desirable. There is no pressure to reintroduce difficulty when nothing requires it. But for others, the absence of challenge becomes intolerable. They begin seeking environments where effort matters again, where outcomes are uncertain, where progress must be earned rather than provided. These spaces are no longer the default. They are selected. Over time, this creates a quiet divide, not between wealth or status, but between those who live inside comfort and those who choose constraint. Between lives that are fully supported and lives that reintroduce limitation on purpose. Difficulty, once universal, becomes optional. And because it is optional, it becomes rare. For most of human history, progress had a direction: forward. It meant improvement, expansion, advancement, a movement away from limitation and toward greater capability. Each generation built on the last, pushing further into what was once impossible. But in a world where everything is already accessible, that direction begins to dissolve. There is no single path forward when all outcomes already exist. Some choose optimization, others choose constraint. Some move toward greater integration with systems, while others move away from them entirely. Progress no longer describes a shared destination. It becomes a personal decision. The idea of forward loses meaning when movement no longer requires overcoming anything. Advancement becomes optional. Improvement becomes subjective. And without a common direction, progress stops being something humanity agrees on. It becomes something each individual defines for themselves. As progress becomes personal, something larger begins to shift. Shared experience starts to dissolve. For most of human history, people moved through the same constraints, the same physical world, the same limits of time, effort, and uncertainty. Even when lives differed, reality itself remained consistent. But when progress no longer points in a single direction, that consistency begins to break. Different individuals begin living in fundamentally different conditions. Some exist in fully optimized environments where friction has been removed entirely. Others choose constraint, reintroducing effort and limitation into their lives. Some integrate deeply with systems. Others remain deliberately separate. Over time, these choices compound. Worlds begin to diverge. Not physically at first, but experientially. What life feels like for one person becomes increasingly unrecognizable to another. Shared reference points fade. Common understanding weakens. And gradually, humanity stops living in the same version of reality. When progress no longer points in a single direction, something deeper begins to fade. The idea of forward. For most of human history, forward was assumed. It was the invisible axis behind every decision, the belief that movement meant improvement, that time carried things somewhere better, that effort accumulated into something meaningful. But when all directions become available at once, that assumption begins to dissolve. There is no shared destination, no universal path, no agreed-upon future. Movement continues, but without alignment. Change persists, but without consensus. People evolve, but not together, and not toward the same outcome. Forward becomes indistinguishable from everywhere else. And without a common sense of direction, something fundamental shifts. Progress does not stop, but it no longer unites.